Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Ranks FC here on YouTube. Here, back once again for another look at the Champions League games tonight. I'm Jack Collins, and I'm joined with the rank god, Mr. Sam Ty. How you doing, mate?
Very well, thank you, mate. Very well. Spent the early afternoon with you recording our podcast for tomorrow, which it's a good one, if I do say so myself. By our own high standards, it's a good one. And yes, we're back once again, 4 p.m. on the Tuesday. Let's talk Champions League.
Indeed. This is crossing with Cheltenham, so you know it's obviously something very, very important. I do love Cheltenham week, the horsies, the nags, as you say, having a go at them. So we'll go on to tonight's action in the Champions League, where Porto are playing Inter. They find themselves 1-0 down after that first leg at San Siro, and then Manchester City host RB Leipzig after a 1-1 draw in their first leg. We'll start, Sam, with Porto against Inter, and this first game for a 1-0 was incredibly entertaining.
It was good. Yeah, it was good. There was a lovely midfield battle, which I always appreciate. And we'll get onto some of the particular standout players in that a little bit later. But really good to see it well contested in the middle. Even though Porto only play with 2 central midfielders and Inter tend to play with 3, it felt like a really even contest. That does obviously disrupt some of the football sometimes, but I'm a bit of a sucker for those that are just willing to go in there and pour it all out there on the pitch and do their absolute best. I think there was a contrast in styles as well. Porto were very methodical with the ball and very slow to move it forward, whereas Inter would try and whip it wide and then whip it into the box pretty much as soon as possible. So a nice contrast of styles. And we had our fair share of chances too. Both goalkeepers had to make some really quite outstanding saves at different points in this game to keep the scoreline, I think, artificially low. This one felt like more like a 2-1 maybe, or something like that. I got the XG timeline here. Look, there's a big spike here from Porto just before the 60-minute mark. I believe that's where Andre Onana makes a double or triple save. I think I saw it as a triple save to start with, but there's also a block, I think, from Skriniar on the line as well. So it kind of jumps up. But really, the story for me is that Inter felt more dangerous throughout the game. Now, the XG timeline doesn't necessarily give you any big shifts. You've got lots of little shifts up, little incremental shifts. That's because most of what they created were balls into the box for headers. Now, unfortunately, Lautaro kind of missed them all. And it does happen. It happens too much for me, but it happened here. Lukaku eventually kind of bails them out and gets them the goal that they need at home, to really feel comfortable moving forward into the second leg. And it comes off a cross from the right from Barella, who was outstanding. But I felt like Inter could and should have been more than one goal to the good here. Porto were combative and solid, but they lacked, I thought, the threat that Inter did. But the XG timeline sort of disagrees with me a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, I watched this too, and I disagree with you a little bit, much as the XG timeline does. Not necessarily in the fact that Inter created a lot of chances and bottled them a little bit, but actually kind of more in the terms. I thought Porto looked dangerous relatively throughout this game, and it looked like they had the ability to put Inter back on the back foot, which I haven't seen hugely of late. Obviously Inter had a bad result this weekend, but of late I've been relatively impressed with how much they've improved and kind of got over that early season slump that we were talking about everywhere. So I was kind of expecting this to be a bit of a one-way traffic and Porto to kind of hang on, and that's almost the game I think you're describing. But I didn't actually feel like that was the game that I witnessed at the time. I thought that Porto looked like they were causing Inter problems in various regards in this first leg.
Yeah, I wouldn't call it one-way traffic, and I didn't mean to sort of describe it like that. If that's how it came across, I think it was very even in midfield and very combative, and I liked the fact that it felt like an even contest. But when it came to actually getting the ball into a dangerous area, I feel like Inter were much stronger in this regard. And like we have a shot map that I'd like to move us to basically try and underline the point here, which is that Inter did end up managing to take several shots from what I consider to be pretty dangerous locations. Now, again, the caveat, the reason it doesn't show up necessarily on the XG timeline is because they're almost all headers. And headers have a naturally low XG chance. They are just harder chances. And so they don't register as highly in terms of the XG. But if you're getting away 5 shots there from either inside the 6-yard box or around the penalty spot, I'd say that you're getting the ball into good areas pretty consistently and you'll manage to carve out chances. And from my perspective, I think Porto were a bit fortunate that Lautaro missed them all. That's where I think that's why I would consider Inter to be dangerous, not because they were getting the ball into those spots. And I don't really see how Porto are going to stop this happening once again heading into tonight. I don't know what they can do tactically, and particularly given the constraints they've got over the personnel due to injury. I don't know if they're going to be able to prevent this from happening again. And I would bet on Lautaro and Lukaku or Dzeko, whoever it is. I would bet on them being more proficient in front of goal tonight. And I would say that they were abnormally poor the first leg.
Okay. All right. Well, let's go into those lineups, shall we? And just take a little look at it. I'm going to keep it full screen on here for it's easier to see for now. Now, we should probably caveat we're not 100% sure this is going to be completely correct. Joao Mario, we think, is injured at right back for Porto. I can't hugely see Danny Loader, Namaso, who's in there in the middle, or Andre Franco starting for Porto tonight when Galeno is there. Aquino on the other side is Pepper. You might know him a little bit better as. So there's a couple of names in there that might not look particularly familiar, but with Joao Mario out, it looks a little bit uncomfortable for them at right back. And Fede DeMarco has come back in at a very opportune time here for Inter, returned from injury just as Robin Gerson's picked up that injury. It feels like there could be some joy here for Inter down that left-hand flank. And if there is, then you can see those crosses coming in again from those kind of areas.
Yeah, I mean, there was actually possibly more of a focus from the right-hand side in the first leg, using the right wing back, using Darmian, and then later Barella, who obviously goes from right centre mid, runs the channel, and then drops out into these little pockets, picks up the ball, and is able to send the ball into really dangerous areas. So first leg was more a focus on the right side. This time, you're possibly right in that, allied with Porto's personnel weakness on the right-hand side and the fact that DeMarco is back and he's had a cracking season, he really has. Maybe the focus comes down the left-hand side. With the Porto 11, like, it is genuinely very difficult to figure out what they're going to do because they do have a lot of problems. They do have a lot of injuries. I really thought that they were going to be in a much clearer position coming up to this game. Obviously, heading into the first leg, they still had lots of issues, and they were only just able to get people from suspension or injury back. Evan Nilsson came off the bench in that first leg. I expected to see that he'd be ready for this one, but he's had a setback and he's not really been able to play recently. That's been a problem. We might see Eustachio. We might see Galeno. We might see Tony Martinez. I don't know what we're going to see at right back. But either way, this is a Porto team that feels like it's been muddling through games over the last month, mixing and matching combinations, pulling players from wherever they can to field teams. And they've not been particularly solid, have they, in the league? Like, they're playing poor teams like Chavez and whoever else it was in the last 3 weeks that I forget.
Estoril, although I think Estoril is actually quite a good side,
but they're conceding goals against these teams, in a way that you don't necessarily expect them to. So I don't feel like they're stepping into this game in the ideal mindset or with the ideal form or with the fit players that they would obviously ideally like to call on.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see what they do at right back. Rodrigo Conceição, another son of the manager. We saw Chico Conceição making a big old difference last year. Obviously, he went off to Ajax, and we were wondering what was going to happen. So they brought through another one, Rodrigo Conceição, who can play at right back. Whether he does that or whether they kind of mix it up, you were suggesting it might be Sanusi at right back, Sam, with Wendell going in at left back. I hope they don't do that. Let's be honest. I hope they don't do that.
No, I don't want to see that either. But this is the sort of territory that Porto are in right now. They have to muddle through this, and they have to cobble a team together. And if you're in that position, if you're cobbling a team together due to injuries and all sorts of other issues, it's just like, it's not great, is it? I mean, in the first leg, I was a particular fan of Mateus Uribe's performance. But since this performance, like, he's barely really been able to play. Like, he's had a red card in the league. So it's been stop-start. You ideally like these players to be heading into this game full of confidence.
He came off the bench at the weekend, or on Friday night, I think the game was, to step in for Marco Grujic, who's in that 11 that we saw there, who also might be injured. He suffered a knock. We're not quite sure how serious that was. Uribe got those 45 minutes, and he could be really crucial here, I think.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, I opened this conversation talking about how close and how combative that midfield battle was. And one of the prime reasons for that was Mateus Uribe, who I just think had surely one of the best games of his career. Like, obviously he's a good player, but I don't think he's ever gone to this level. Sometimes, and the way I describe this sometimes is, I feel like there were three of him, and that's one of the biggest compliments I think I can pay. Like a really very busy, combative midfielder. He was absolutely everywhere, and the heat map kind of suggests that too. Like all through the central column and left hand side, he was a factor. Now, obviously, on the right hand side, Grujic is stepping over where possible to try and patrol that area. And Grujic was good in the first leg, but Uribe, man, slamming into tackles, passing through the lines, like genuinely fantastic stuff. It's the best I've ever seen him play, and they need another one of these tonight.
Yeah, I mean, I just seen this from Hugo, who says if Pepper's fit, Conceição is going to play him at right back.
Yeah, there you go.
I'm not 100% sure how comfortable I am with it, but
well, I mean, it definitely has happened, doesn't it? And it's probably what has to happen if if injuries dictate it. So yeah, not great. He's not exactly the most defensive-minded player, is he, Pepe?
No,
this
not huge. Not this one. Yeah, not this one. Not this one. Pepper at right back and Pep at centre back is going to be quite the interesting one for the commentators to try and have to deal with. I mean, look, I was going to do this after the second game, but I think this might be an opportune moment to do it. So let's take this question from Luis. Shouts out to Luis, by the way. He's one of our designers and has designed most of the things that you see for ranks in terms of thumbnails and graphics, etc., etc. So big shout out. Luis. He says, hello, which game should I watch today? And I imagine our answers on this are going to be different, Sam.
Well, I'm going to watch this one. What are you going to do?
I'm going to watch Leipzig against Manchester City because I find it really intriguing. But I'm just going to give you a second to state your case as to why.
Because I watched the first leg, so I need to watch the second one. You got to close the chapter, Jack. But no, okay, fine. I don't think I can give you a good answer for this. I genuinely don't. Like Man City Leipzig feels like it's more finely poised with the 1-1. Actually, what is it?
Is it? Yeah. The 1-0 away from home. I'd actually argue that's something in your court, but
I don't know if it's more finely poised. I mean, I presume that the reason for the question is that you're struggling to pick one, Lewis, and I don't have an answer for you. I'm going to complete the saga. I'm going to watch both legs of this game. But I would not blame you for watching Man City. I mean, there's always going to be some intrigue on Pep Guardiola and Champions League nights, right? There's got to be. There's inbuilt intrigue. And there's just always that propensity for it to go horribly, badly wrong. And if City go out tonight, you probably will have want to watch it because it will be all anybody's talking about tomorrow. So maybe I'd shade for that one. But I'll be here with Porto and Inter.
Okay, well, on that bombshell, I think it's probably time for us to move over to the other game, which is Manchester City against RB Leipzig up in Manchester. And it was a really, really interesting game, this first leg. And I think what you're seeing here in terms of the XG, and we usually start here, so I'm going to do so again, is a tale of two halves. And there's a plenty of different things I'm going to show you now in the next couple of minutes that basically dictate this and prove this as a point, because it was very much a game where City felt completely in the ascendancy. And at halftime, Marco Rose needs to be given major credit because he completely switched up the way that RB Leipzig attacked. He made a major change, which was bringing on Benjamin Henrichs for Lucas Klostermann. But not just that, in terms of the way that then Leipzig pushed the fullbacks onwards in order to try and get in behind Manchester City. They got a lot of joy on the left-hand side, trying to get around Kyle Walker and into those spaces. Now, whether that plays out or not tonight in a similar fashion is going to be interesting, because I imagine that Leipzig will actually try to be slightly more transitional. Pep Guardiola spoke about this at length. He talked about the fact that if you leave space in behind, German teams can really hurt you. And therefore, he tried to talk about control and talk about maintaining the game. But I think tonight, we're actually going to see probably a little bit more of that transitional stuff, because Leipzig were really good in possession. And you're seeing the numbers generally across the course of this season. Leipzig's, the way that they've played, their possession stats, etc., have actually dictated the fact that Rose is trying to find more solutions for them in possession than just playing as a transitional team. But going back to that old philosophy might be something that actually helps RB tonight if they're gonna try and get the better of Manchester City. This I found really interesting is the average positions across the two halves, and Manchester City's obviously is further pulled back in that second half. But look at the cluster here, Sam, on that left-hand side for Leipzig. And the way that they started to get all these players into these areas to try and hurt Manchester City down that side, try and take advantage of the fact that Kyle Walker obviously likes to get forward, especially the way that City are currently kind of tilting, means that Walker is often the more offensive of the fullbacks. But the way that they tried to target the area and behind, especially when Christopher Nkunku came on, was pretty stunning.
Yeah, so I didn't watch this game, and I took requests for you. Said, Jack, what graphics would you like in order to illustrate what happened in this game? And you asked me for the difference in average positions for the two teams in the first half and the second half. And the first one looked, relatively normal. Left side of the screen, first half, Leipzig on the back foot a little bit, playing a bit deeper. Man City pushing up a little bit there, obviously. And then you go to the second half, and I was like, Jack, I think something might have gone wrong. Like, with the way the graphic was spat out, like what's happened? There's like 5 people stood in the same 5-yard area on the pitch. You're like, no, this is perfect. Look at Leipzig ganging up on the left-hand side. And it kind of illustrates it where you've obviously got left back, left wing, left centre mid, left forward, all in there. And you've got the right forward in there as well. They're all running over to the left-hand side of the pitch to overload it. It's fantastic. And then, of course, it's reciprocated somewhat on the other side. You look at Manchester City moving on the right-hand side. They're possibly trying to bottle that a bit higher up. Look at where the forward is. Far right-hand side, right wing, far right. And they're trying to maybe stop that early doors. They're trying to protect Walker a bit higher up. It's genuinely fascinating. And it looks like a graphic that's kind of gone wrong. But you assure me that this is exactly what happened.
No, this is what happened. And I think when you take it over to, those players that we were talking about earlier, Klosterman and Benjamin Henrichs, the difference in their touch maps, obviously these are the two. This is the first half on the left and the second half on the right because Henrichs replaced Klosterman at half time. You look at the amount of work that Klosterman was doing in his own box, in his own half, and you compare it to the way that Henrichs was getting into the City penalty box. He obviously had a massive chance just after coming on. The chance fell to him, but that's what they tried to do, to kind of work the ball down that left-hand side to get those combinations going and then find Henrichs with that switch pass that allowed him to get into those areas where they caused trouble. And to be perfectly honest with you, Leipzig were good value for getting that equalizer in the first leg. And they will probably feel that if they'd played in that manner for the whole game, they would have been able to hurt City further. As it is, 1-1 probably still hands the advantage to City. Their record at home in European competitions is very, very impressive. But it's going to be intriguing to see how Rosa sets this up tonight, because I thought Leipzig were good in this first leg. I thought that they know how to get into these areas. Obviously, Nkunku is still missing, which means that Timo Werner is going to have to do a lot of work. He's got a brilliant goal at the weekend, which will have given him some real confidence. But you kind of look at how these two teams might set up now, and it's going to be intriguing to see what Rosa does. I mean, David Raum here, obviously making those inroads down the left-hand side. They've gone for Mohamed Simakan at right back. I think they might be right, because I actually think, despite the fact that Henrichs was really impressive and really important in the way that Leipzig played in the second half, they are going to look to be a little bit more reactive tonight, and it might just suit them sitting in a bit deeper and having this sort of right back, right centre back cross in Simakan on that right-hand side to stop City being able to get that control and get those kind of areas under their spell again.
Yeah, I mean, this is the thing you have to remember when you draw these things up and you speculate as to how the game's going to go. Like, a football game is 90 minutes long. I mean, a Champions League game obviously is 180, but tonight the stakes are even. It's 1-1 and it's 90 minutes long. The last thing that Leipzig want to do here is put themselves out of the game early doors. And if you combine that and that probable slightly cautious start where you just stay in it, stay within reach, don't go out all guns blazing and try to shock Man City and end up 2-0 down, and then it's over, it's done. They're probably going to try and stay relatively composed and cool for at least the first 20, 30, maybe opening stages. Just make sure you get into this game properly and don't count yourself out. Combine that with Man City and their lust for ultimate control over the tempo of a football match. And, it could be said, nerves on a European night, given it's really not gone to plan the entire time so far. I wonder if, and I'd be delighted to be wrong here. In fact, I'm looking forward to being dead wrong. I wonder if this is a bit of a slow starter. As Leipzig try to stay in the game and City try to control the game and control the tempo of the game and exert their control over it and try to settle in quite slowly. And then later in the second half, one goal and it just erupts, like genuinely. I wonder if that's how it goes. And so I wouldn't be surprised, as you say, to see maybe Simicon start over on the right-hand side, and maybe they start to use the substitutions via the fullbacks to get more into it later. That's a good strategy. That's exactly what you should be doing in the 5-sub era.
It's exactly what they should have been doing in this second leg, I think. I think maybe it wasn't the right strategy in the first leg, and Rosa will look back at that with a slight regret that they weren't able to make the most of that first leg. Someone who isn't on this lineup, but I think might well have a say tonight is Phil Foden, and his kind of renaissance of late has been really impressive for Manchester City. And I know this is kind of not hugely it's not hugely surprising. Everyone knows how good a player Phil Foden has been, and there were plenty of question marks over the fact that he wasn't playing in these games where it felt like a player with a little bit more of that tight touch control, those who can play in those pockets just off the striker might have been able to make things happen a little bit easier for Manchester City. Pep obviously sticks with what he likes at the exact time. Those things can change, but he's played more and more of late. And I thought this one against Newcastle was important. I know it's obviously not City's last game, but his game against Newcastle I think was important because that's the kind of game I can see this being tonight. And I thought he was excellent in that game, getting into those areas, making things happen in the half spaces on the edge of the box, linking up with Haaland, getting into the area, making chances happen. I wonder if this is a game where Pep goes for the Foden deploy from the start and brings Riyad Mahrez on a little bit later in order just to make those things tick a little bit more when Leipzig sit back a little bit further.
The thing I love about this touch map the most, and obviously we do have the Palace one from the weekend, and it's quite similar, but it's not quite as perfect as this one, because if you just take into account the opposition half here, there is no touch for Phil Foden of this ball anywhere beyond the halfway strip if you split the pitch vertically. And we know that old story, I'm sure you've all heard it, but I'll repeat it for context's sake, of Thierry Henry talking about being managed by Guardiola when he was at Barcelona and how he was deployed on the left wing. And in the first half, he wasn't seeing a lot of the balls, so he moved over to the right wing, picked the ball up, scored. They were 1-0 up at half-time. At half-time, Pep Guardiola substituted Thierry Henry because he had told him to stay on the left side of the pitch. And even though he'd gone to the right and scored to put them in the lead, that was not okay because that was not part of the plan. And Guardiola does do this. He does restrict his wingers. He doesn't let them swap over. Oh, you do 10 minutes over there. It's all part of a game plan. They are supposed to occupy certain areas of the pitch. And this touch map is very Guardiola winger. It's very funny. And I just thought it really encapsulates the role that he asks his wingers to play. And Foden in this game was obviously just genius. I mean, look at all the little touches all bunched together outside the box and inside the box. These are those tight spaces you're referring to. His ability to receive on the half turn and dance and dazzle. Yeah, I mean, it does feel a bit like a game for Phil Foden. And it also feels like a game for Riyad Mahrez. So I don't know what he's going to do here. I have no idea.
Yeah, I mean, Jack Grealish very much locked down on that other side at the moment.
Doing really well,
He's doing a really good job, and Guardiola rightly giving him the game time that he's earned. There you go. You can see Sam's Grealish shirt behind him in higher detail. But with that, I think it's probably time for us to say farewell. 2 really good games tonight between these 4 teams, Porto and Inter, nicely poised at 1-0 to the away side. City probably with the advantage at 1-1 against Leipzig, but we know how quickly those games can turn. We'll be back to do tomorrow's games at 4 p.m. UK on tomorrow. Also, the podcast will be out tomorrow morning. If you're not subscribed, the links are in the description. We've got an interview with Lee Scott, who is the chief scout at Vélez in Spain. He's also part of the people at Total Football Analysis. He's often on Scouted Football. A really, really interesting interview that we did earlier today, and really excited to get that released for you. So make sure you are subscribed. Enjoy the games tonight as well. Thank you very much for all of your questions. Thank you very much to Sam Tai.
Cheers, buddy. Enjoy them yourself. I'll see you tomorrow.
I will do indeed. I've been Jack Collins. This has been Ranks FC, and we'll see you very shortly, gang. Thanks for watching. Take it easy.